You don't have any Stephen King?
You've got the shinin.
You mean shiny.
Shh! You wanna get sued?
It's just your fate. You're that geeky Stephen King kid. There's one of you in every school.
Okay, that's him, that's Cujo, that's Cujo.
I was thinking along the lines of no TV and no beer make Homer something.
Oh, crazy.
Don't mind if I do!
Hello and welcome to Tower Junkies, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. Tower Junkies is a podcast celebrating the work of Stephen King, hosted by two lifelong constant readers. We do non-spoiler and spoiler reviews of King's published work and take a critical look at his film and television adaptations as well. We also discuss the latest King news and check in with each other on our ongoing King obsessions. It's the podcast where all things serve the King. You can find more of our work at TowerJunkiesPod.com. You can also like the Facebook page at Facebook.com/TowerJunkiesPod. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter and every other level of social media at TowerJunkiesPod. And if you'd like to support what we do here, you can become a patron at patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer for a ridiculous amount of bonus content spread across all of ObsessiveViewer.com's various podcasts, which I will be saying an announcement for Stephen King-related Patreon content here shortly. But before I do that, I want to introduce myself. I'm one of your hosts, Matt Hurt, and today on the show, we are going to be reviewing King's latest novel, which was published in September of 2022, his latest novel, Fairy Tale. And joining me to do that, of course, is my co-host for the first episode of 2023 of Tower Junkies, Tiny. Hi, Tiny. How is it going?
Hey, it's going good, man. First of many,
yes.
I believe.
I have a very good feeling about Tower Junkies in 2023, which I will also be talking about at the end of the episode. So to kind of whet your guys' appetite there, we've got some things in the works that we'll announce at the end of the episode. But
Yep.
But yeah. So, of course, we're going to be covering Fairy Tale in separate non-spoiler and spoiler sections. But before we get to all of that, we do have some news and check-ins to get through. Tiny, do you want me to go ahead and rattle off some news items in the Stephen Kingiverse?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, nice. And so a few things. There's a bunch of items, but I'll put links to all of this in the show notes. But the first one is, it was recently announced that King's next novel will be published on September 5th of this year. It is titled Holly, and it is bringing back the character of Holly Gibney. The blurb that I read from SimonandSchuster.com is, Holly Gibney, one of Stephen King's most compelling and ingeniously resourceful characters, returns in this thrilling novel to solve the gruesome truth behind multiple disappearances in a Midwestern town. So that is coming out on September 5th, and I'm looking forward to it. New King is new King. Tiny, how do you feel about Holly Gibney, and how are you anticipating the novel Holly?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I haven't read a Holly Gibney story in a while. I didn't read the story that she's in for If It Bleeds. I haven't gotten to If It Bleeds yet. But I like that character. I think she's fun. She's kind of a Detective Hodges took a chance on her. Yeah. I thought she was a fun addition to that trilogy, and I think it's kind of funny how King keeps coming back to her. Like, she makes appearances in other stories, and there's a short story with her, and now she gets a whole novel just for her. She's got to be one of his most returned to characters.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I also kind of like that. Like, Holly Gibney is someone who's grown on me. I haven't read the story in If It Bleeds, but I have read, the Bill Hodges trilogy and The Outsider. And I feel like, was she also in a short story that he released? I don't know, maybe not. But anyway, aside from all that. But anyway, I find it interesting also, this is just a random observation that has no bearing on anything, but I just find it interesting that King is adding to his stable of novels that are named after character names. So
That's
like,
true.
Yeah, so like Christine, Carrie, Dolores Claiborne, Holly now, Billy Summers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't really think of any others off the top of my head.
Rose Matter?
I don't know, actually.
Is that her name? I don't know. Yeah.
That's a good question. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't know.
I thought that was a character's name, but I haven't read that one. So
I haven't either. So listeners are going crazy right now. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting. Interesting for that. I don't think that is the character's name in Rose Matter.
Okay.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, that's exciting. New King is New King. I find it interesting that it's almost like it's exactly a year after Fairy Tale was published, and I'm assuming that we're not getting 2 novels this year, which is fine. But yeah, I'm excited nonetheless.
Sweet, me too.
Yeah, I've already got the hardcover pre-ordered on Amazon and a credit allocated for it on Audible. So
Nice.
Yeah, looking forward to it. The next piece of news I have is news about the Billy Summers movie. It was originally going to be, it was eyed for a 10-episode limited series, but Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams' production company, and Leonardo DiCaprio's production company, Appian Way, are working on it as a feature film. And it could be, it hasn't necessarily been said, but I think that the idea is that maybe J.J. Abrams will direct with Leonardo DiCaprio playing Billy Summers. How do you feel about this news and the possibility of Leo being Billy Summers?
We've talked about it before. I can't picture anybody but Paul Sparks.
Same.
As Billy Summers. But I mean, Leo DiCaprio is fantastic. So,
Yeah.
And it sounds like he wants to be, not like, oh, this came across my desk and it seemed interesting, so I'm going to do it. It's like he's involved at a production level too. So, that's, I feel like that's a good sign, that it could be a quality adaptation. So yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited for it.
Yeah, I agree. I just really wish that Paul Sparks would take that role. But I mean, Leo is Leo, so I mean, you can't really argue against it. How do you feel about this change up from limited series to feature film?
I think I kind of like it because I don't know why. I think because I'm so gung ho on TV right now. That's my jam right now, and I think you could totally make Billy Summers into like a limited series, like 6 episodes or something.
Oh yeah.
Maybe even 8, but I don't know. I feel like a good creative mind could edit down the parts that need to be edited down and hone it down to where it needs to be to make it a really tight, like 2-hour movie or something like that. I think that's totally possible and could be a good move for that story.
Yeah, I think so too. I adore that novel. That one just kind of blew me away a little bit. It was I have such a soft spot for it. So anything that happens with it, I'm invested in it, and I think a feature film would work really well, especially with the talent involved. So yeah, I'm excited for it.
Nice.
Yeah. The next piece of news that I have, these last like 3 are going to be pretty quick, but did you see the trailer for The Boogeyman? I don't think I have. Yeah, I should have sent you a link. I'm sorry, but some time ago, like a week or 2 ago, The Boogeyman had a trailer, which The Boogeyman is a feature film adaptation of Stephen King's short story of the same name, The Boogeyman, which I actually covered in episode 83 of the podcast with friend of the show, Kim C. And we talked about it, and at the time, the Boogeyman feature film was going to be a Hulu release sometime in 2023. But I think because they heard the episode and heard us rave about the short story, they decided to pivot to a theatrical release. So the Boogeyman is going to come out on June 2nd in theaters. It's directed by Rob Savage, who directed the movie Host in 2020. Did you ever see Host, Tiny?
I don't think I did. Is that a Stephanie Meyer book? Or am I thinking of something else?
You're thinking of something else. You're thinking of The Host, which is a Stephanie Meyer book and is a movie. But Host in 2020 was this basically COVID pandemic movie that was like found footage or live stream sort of movie where characters get together for like a virtual seance. And crazy shit happens, and it's all like through the perspective of like seeing their like Zoom call. So it's one of those, but it was effective and cool. It was really interesting, and I'm curious to see what he does with the Boogeyman. The short story is amazing. I've sung the praises of Night Shift. That collection is absolutely just insanely good. And the trailer leads me to believe, I only saw it once, but it leads me to believe that they're taking quite a bit of liberties with it. So I'm curious to see what kind of spin they'll put on it. But yeah, it comes out in theaters June 2nd. So we'll have to cover it. I already told Kim C that she'll have to come back to the podcast to review it with us. So hopefully we can get that worked out.
Definitely. Yeah. I need to read it.
Yes.
When you first said that, I went to, IMDb. I don't know if you go to IMDb on your computer much, but the website's really nice, and like they have like videos that autoplay when you go to like a certain, like if you go to what it like Leo DiCaprio's page, it'll play like a trailer for a movie he's been in recently or whatever. So I went to the Boogeyman page, and the trailer's right there, and like I don't even have the sound playing, and I'm watching it, and holy shit, like that looks fucking scary as hell.
Yeah, it looks super creepy. Oh yeah. And the cast is pretty good too. It's got Chris Messina, who I'm a fan of, David Dasmalchian, who's getting a lot of he's been in so many things. Interesting enough, it also has Marin Ireland, who did the audiobook narration for I want to say Sleeping Beauties.
Okay.
I think. Let me double check.
Okay.
Audiobooks narrated by Marin Ireland. There is a much easier way for me to do this, and I did not do it that way. Yeah, she narrated Sleeping Beauties on Audible. Okay. So yeah, so that's cool. Oh, also Gwendy's Final Task, and I presume the other Gwendy novels. So that's neat. Anyway. Yeah, so looking forward to that June 2nd. And the next piece of news I have, obviously I'll have links to all this in the show notes of the episode, which can also be found at towerjunkiespod.com/084. And I just dropped my phone, so I'm sure that the sound picked up there, but I'm not going to bother picking it up. Anyway, the other piece of news I have, this will be quick because I don't know much about it and I just hit the mic. There's a new Children of the Corn adaptation that's coming out. It was originally completed in 2020 and was shelved, but it was picked up by RLJE Media, I think, and Shudder. So it's going to have a theatrical release on March 3rd, and I think it's going to have a 17-day window. So on March 20th is when it's going to be on demand, and I don't know if that's when it's going to go on Shudder to stream or if it's going to be like later. But it's coming. Yeah. What's your relationship with Children of the Corn? Have you read the story, or I'm sure you've seen the movie. Have you?
I haven't read the story. I think I've seen the first movie because I want to say there's like 5 or 6 movies if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I think there's maybe 9 or 10, honestly.
Oh,
like
geez.
A lot of like straight to video stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. I think I've seen the original one. I want to say Mark Hamill's in it, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think so. Linda Hamilton's in it.
Okay, I might be thinking of something else. But anyways, I know I've seen the original movie, and I thought it was kind of decent. Like if it was like it was a little campy, cheesy for sure.
Sure.
But I want to say, like, I think if somebody did it right, it could be kind of a cool movie. But I haven't read the story though. That's something I should get around to. Is it a short story or is it a full novel?
It's a short story, and it is in Night Shift. So yeah, I highly recommend Night Shift, and also plug for the Patreon. I have Patreon reaction record, like the Church of King thing I have with Night Shift and several other short story collections. But yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. So that's coming out March 3rd. And then finally, this is not, honestly, I don't think that this is even worth talking about because it's not news, but I just want to kind of mention it, that apparently Mike Flanagan tweeted a picture of himself with Pedro Pascal. And that caused, in what I could see from my limited viewpoint, a little bit of a upheaval in the fandom, with talking about, is he going to play Roland? Which hey, that casting would be amazing. I would love him to do that.
Samesies.
Yeah. But there's no way he's going to be cast as Roland. There's no way.
No way.
Yeah.
No way.
I don't, and so much so, I don't see a reason to even speculate on it, because he's the Mandalorian. He's Joel in The Last of Us. These are both like similar story or similar kind of archetypes. And like, I don't see him taking on the role of Roland. I don't know.
The leading guy in 3 TV shows at once. No way. Honestly, I wouldn't want that, because like I think with the Mandalorian, it's so hard. That's the reason why there's so much time between seasons. Part of it anyways is that he's busy. He's got so much shit going on, and it's hard to get him into film that, big green screen stuff. So
yep, absolutely. So so just wanted to mention it here, just to mention it, but yeah, well, I mean, cool. It's cool that they had a picture tweeted of them, so that's cool. Yeah. They seem like 2 very good guys in the industry, so that's good. Totally. But yeah, but that's all the news that I have. Do you want to go into check-ins, and do you have any check-ins?
I do have one check-in. It's a little, it's unconventional, but I do have a check-in. Normally I'm like, no. So, just the one though. Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead and hit us with it?
Yeah, sure. So it's, like I said, unconventional. So my mom recently, had surgery, major surgery, back in right after Thanksgiving. She had surgery. Her recovery is slated to be 6 to 12 months. Like it's a big deal.
Yeah.
To put it in perspective, the incision from the surgery is 22 inches long.
Jesus. How's she?
My mom is 5'3", so that's basically half her body.
How's she doing with that? Because she's posted on Facebook of a bit. It seems like she's doing well.
That's the good news. She's doing fantastic.
Awesome.
She is in way better shape than before she went in for the surgery.
That's awesome.
My mom looks like she is 10 years younger, basically.
Nice.
Yeah, she's 5'3", and before the surgery, she was like slouching to be like 5'1" or 5 foot tall. Just very uncomfortable. And now she's sitting up straight and so much more. She had surgery on her spinal cord, by the way. Or her spine, not the cord, but her spine. Anyways, so yeah, she's doing fantastic, like really good recovery. She's way ahead of schedule. She feels really good. Better than she's felt in years. So that's all fantastic.
Nice.
My mom, she likes Stephen King. She, I don't know that I wouldn't call her a huge fan, but part of the reason why I'm a big fan is because my mom and dad had several of old Stevie's books on the shelf, and I looked at the covers of them for years and thought they looked cool and wanted to know what they were about until I finally read one.
Yep.
I think I've told those stories before on the podcast.
Oh yeah.
And so I knew my mom had this big recovery coming up, and so she was going to be laying down in bed a lot. So I wanted to. I really enjoyed. Spoiler alert! Really enjoyed Fairy Tale.
Nice.
And I was like, I'm going to get my mom a copy of Fairy Tale so she has something to read while she's recovering.
Very nice.
Yeah. So the check-in is I gave the book to my mom a couple weeks after her surgery. She said, "Oh, I haven't read. This is great. I haven't read a Stephen King novel in a really long time."
Okay.
And I was like, "Really?" Because I kind of thought she was a fan and everything. I mean, she is, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I thought she was a little more up to date. Do you have? I won't give you hints or anything. She just said, "I haven't read a Stephen King novel in a long time." What do you think is the last novel by old Stevie K that my mom read?
Oh, okay. This is fun.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's going to be something insane. It's going to be like, oh, I haven't read a Stephen King novel since Carrie.
No.
Okay.
Not that far back. It is not. We were out of high school.
Oh, okay. I am going to say it wouldn't be, I'm trying to think of the most like crazy, like one. Would it be Wind Through the Keyhole?
No.
Okay. I give up.
Further back than that.
Okay.
It was Under the Dome. Under the Dome. In
Oh,
2009.
really? Now, did
That
she
is the last
read
time
it?
she read.
Did she read it like when your dad read it too? Because I know that your dad read it in like a night or something like that, something ridiculous like that. Didn't he?
I think it was. I don't. Maybe it's possible. My mom can read like the wind.
Yeah.
My dad's not as fast. I think if that happened, it was probably my mom. Like she can read. I mean, there are several novels she's read in one day. Yeah, so
Jeez.
I don't know if Under the Dome was, but she's read several novels. Like there's several novels that she's read in a day.
Nice. Okay.
But yeah. So yeah,
Wow.
I was like, wow, I was like that. I was like, Under the Dome came out in 2009. I thought maybe it was a little older than that. But still, that's 14 years ago. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's wild to think of that in anyway. Yeah, that's wild.
I don't know if she's read it yet.
Okay, I was just going to ask.
I'm not sure if she's even. Yeah, I don't even know if she started it yet. So
nice. Well, definitely keep us up to date on that because I'd be curious to know what she thought of it.
Totally.
Yeah. And that's your only check-in?
That's my only check-in. Yes.
Okay. So I only have really one check-in one check-in and one shameless self-promotion. The check-in is regarding our friend Kim C and her show, The Year of Underrated Stephen King. I started listening to her episode covering the Langoliers tonight while I was getting ready for the podcast and everything. And first of all, it was really funny because she references Lost in it, and like she like prefaces it by saying that like she references me and says like she and I have sparred about Lost on the show a little bit, and and she says, so I'll put this as delicately as I can, and like 'cause she's not like she appreciates Lost, but I think she does. I think she doesn't have. She's not fond of the ending. But anyway, that's just kind of a shameless promotion of her show that she's covering 4 Past Midnight, which is one of my favorite novella collections of King. And her episode covering the Langoliers is a lot of fun. Yeah, and there's some really fun anecdotes about it too. So check that out. The Year of Underrated Stephen King. And I've got my other check-in is a shameless plug for the Patreon. So couple things. One is, as we are about to review Fairy Tale, I want to mention that I did a 6-part series on like a read-along review on Patreon, where basically 6 installments. I cover around 100 pages per installment, and recordings range from 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Just me sharing my thoughts on that segment of the book. And total runtime of 4 hours of content on Patreon. So check that out on patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. But I want to mention that I have just kind of tweaked the tiers on Patreon a little bit. So, so if you're a fan of Tower Junkies, but you, for whatever reason, you don't like listen to Obsessive Viewer or Anthology, our other podcasts, and you are interested in the Patreon, but you don't want to be just bombarded with a bunch of like, Obsessive Viewer stuff and stuff that has nothing to do with Stephen King. I have created a $4 Patreon tier that is just... What it is it is just the Stephen King related content on our Patreon. So at the $1 level, we do B-roll recordings and kind of off-the-cuff stuff, early access to episodes, all that stuff. $2, we do TV and movie and book reaction recordings and immediate reaction recordings and special episodes. And then $5, we get more robust movie reviews, like I call them Patreon potpourri, where I put like a bunch of reviews together across like 4 movies, and then also commentary tracks. So we have a Patreon level for $4 that takes all of the Stephen King content that's on the $1, $2, and $5 levels and packages them together on the $4 level. So, all that's to say, if you want to support the show on Patreon and don't want to have to dive through a bunch of crap, not crap, it's all good stuff. If you don't want to have to wade through a whole bunch of non-Stephen King related stuff, you can pledge the $4 a month and get access to just Stephen King content. So that's the plug for Patreon. Again, that's at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. And that's all the check-ins I have. Tiny, do you want to get into our review of Fairy Tale?
Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. So now we're going to review Fairy Tale. Of course, we're going to do a non-spoiler and spoiler section. So I'm going to just give some information up top, and then we're going to go into non-spoilers, the non-spoiler portion of the review for Fairy Tale. So Fairy Tale was originally published on September 6th, 2022, in hardcover and on audiobook. The page count is 608 pages, and the synopsis, courtesy of SimonandSchuster.com, is... Legendary storyteller Stephen King goes into the deepest well of his imagination in this spellbinding novel about a 17-year-old boy who inherits the keys to a parallel world where good and evil are at war, and the stakes could not be higher for that world or ours. Charlie Reed looks like a regular high school kid, great at baseball and football, a decent student, but he carries a heavy load. His mom was killed in a hit-and-run accident when he was 7, and grief drove his dad to drink. Charlie learned how to take care of himself and his dad. When Charlie is 17, he meets a dog named Radar and her aging master, Howard Bowditch, a recluse in a big house at the top of a big hill with a locked shed in the backyard. Sometimes strange sounds emerge from it. Charlie starts doing jobs for Mr. Bowditch and loses his heart to Radar. Then, when Bowditch dies, he leaves Charlie a cassette tape telling him a story no one would believe. What Bowditch knows and has kept secret all his long life is that inside the shed is a portal to another world. So, Tiny, in non-spoilers, first of all, how did you consume this piece of media? Did you read it? Did you listen to the audiobook? And in non-spoilers, what did you think about Fairy Tale and the adventure of Charlie Reed and Radar?
Yes, I did the audiobook for this one.
Nice.
That's 99 times out of 100. That's how I roll, just because it's so convenient.
Yeah.
This was narrated by Seth Numrich, who also did. Did
he do Later?
Later, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know why that was escaping me, but yeah, he did Later. I'm a fan. I think he does a really good job. So,
me too. And I
enjoyed.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I was floored. I was floored that he was able, like, that he got to narrate like a full length novel, because later is very brief. So yeah.
Right. So yeah, I started listening to this not right away. I think I waited a month or two, but I finished it back in December, I think. So yeah, I was anxious to get to it. Like, it wasn't one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, I need to be listening to fairy tale. Like, I wanted, when I had downtime, I was like, oh, I'm going to listen to this because I'm into this story, and it's compelling, and I'm thinking about it when I'm not reading it, which are all really good signs.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I ended up really enjoying fairy tale. I think it is a flawed book. I don't know that it's going to be a top 19. I think it could. But I think I was just really into the story. Like, it was just a fun adventure story. It totally made me think of something like, Narnia, like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or obviously there's fantasy parallels with something like Lord of the Rings, or even Stephen King's Dark Tower. I think very early on I mentioned to you, hey, I wonder if this is going to be Dark Tower. Like, I wonder if there's going to be an Easter egg, or some mentions of characters or locations, or something about time as a wheel, or spoke, or something like that, or something about beams. I was like, I could totally see that coming up in this story. And I think part of my enthusiasm was me coming back to it, wanting to get to that point.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny, because it's not, it's
Right.
it is its own. I don't mean to spoil anything, but this is its own story. He doesn't try to connect it to anything. It doesn't reference other works directly, really. It's a very self-contained, and I don't want to say one of a kind, but it's not trying to shoehorn in other references or other works or other worlds that he's created before. This is genuinely a brand new, fresh palette that he is painting. And I just appreciated it for that. And I thought the good versus evil theme of the story was nice and simple, and just consumable. Like, I just wanted to, it was like watching a serial show. I just wanted to come back to it because I wanted to know what happens next, not because I was, super enthralled by the references it was making, or it had anything super unique to say. It was just a good story at the end of the day.
Nice. Well said. And I do think that there's a lot to say about it being its own self-contained story. It's not trying to, it's a big enough story in itself that he isn't trying to, like you said, shoehorn in it into the King multiverse or anything like that. So that's definitely a feather in the cap of the book. For me, in non-spoiler terms, I enjoyed this book quite a bit. Toward the end, I kind of, it kind of didn't go the route that I really wanted it to. I kind of feel like it petered out a little bit, but what I liked about it was just that sense of scale and imagination of it. Throughout most of the book, King just develops Charlie Reed as a character. He's a first-person narrator in the book, and he just divulges to the audience so much about his own personal pain and suffering, and his outlook on the world and everything. And then when you get into the meat of the story, you're introduced to this kind of just this classic fairy tale imagination, like dripping storyline of good versus evil. And the arc that he goes on, like the journey that he goes on, is really, really strong and very compelling. It's a lot, like, there are sections of the book where I'm like I also listened to the audiobook, and since I did the read along review on Patreon, I basically would have to stop after a certain point and then record a review, and then I would be able to progress. There was like at one point I was walking around my complex listening to the audiobook, and then like I walked over to a nearby coffee shop, and I had taken my laptop and I was just typing up notes as I'm listening to the audiobook, and I'm just sitting there thinking like, I don't want to put this down. It is just, I am so wrapped up in the story, in the adventure, and in what is being presented to me about this other world that he's in. And that's like, that is kind of premium King for me. But as the story kind of like pressed on, there was a point where I'm like, okay, well, I have like X number of pages left. Like, how are they like this? It's both a compliment to the story and ultimately to the story's overall detriment that I'm like, I want like 300 more pages than what we've got. Like this, it's already a big novel. It's 600 pages, which is nothing to sneeze at. But toward the end, I'm like, there's so much story in this story that I feel like it could have been an extra 200 to 300 pages long to really dive into the good versus evil of it. And I think that because we don't have that, there's a level of not brevity, but it's a level of just quick movement through the latter part of the book that kind of just felt a little bit unsatisfying to me. But like I said, the imagination at play and the way that Charlie's journey just progresses throughout this other world is really really compelling for me. So I enjoyed the book overall. It sounds like I enjoyed it maybe a little bit less than you did, Tiny, but I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's good. I mean, it's King. It's good King stuff. So
Totally.
Yeah. While we're still in non-spoilers, do you want to talk about the character of Charlie Reed and in particular, like the first like third or maybe like half of the book where it's mostly him bonding with Radar and Mr. Bowditch and dealing with kind of the pain or the grief of like his mother dying when he was at a young age and his father's sobriety. Like, how did you feel about that kind of arc through the first half of the book?
I thought Charlie was was I love that character. I can't wait to talk about that.
Yes.
I thought he was actually a deeper character than he even needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of surprised at the depth of his character, because there's several themes that play throughout his development and his progress through this story,
Mm-hmm.
that are more than just interesting. It really influences how he makes his way through the story.
Yeah.
I think to me one of the most interesting parts is that he almost has this kind of chip on his shoulder because he is undeniably like a good kid. Like he's he's good at sports, gets good grades, helped his dad achieve sobriety in some ways, and he's undeniably a good kid, but he keeps coming back to the idea that he has to make up for what he did in the past, where he kind of gives the audience this sort of vague description of just kind of doing some what I would call kind of normal teenage boy stuff. And I'm not saying like boys will be boys, but they blew up some like put fireworks in people's mailboxes and stuff like that. I mean, it's nothing crazy, right?
Yeah.
But I understand why he feels the way he does. And I think it's admirable that he wants to make up for something that most people would kind of write off as just stupid teenage crap. But maybe because he's still a teenager himself, it has more weight to it in that regard. But yeah, I really liked the idea that the entire onus for him going on this adventure is that he's trying to make up for stuff he's done in the past. And he still has all this other trauma, really,
Mhm.
that influences him, that he has every right to be upset about, like the loss of his mother. And
Mhm.
he while he loves his dad, absolutely, he still harbors some anger and resentment at his dad
Yeah.
for all the nights that he had to get him to bed or had to take care of himself because his dad was too drunk.
Mhm.
um it's kind of amazing that he's as good of a kid as he is. So I think all those pieces of twine wound into a big twine ball of who Charlie is really interesting to watch it roll down the hill through this story. I kind of love that. I love how deep King went with it, because I really don't think we needed a character that deep to get us
Mhm.
through this story, but it led us down some really good paths, and I appreciated it for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And there's multiple levels to that as well, because not only is he trying to atone for the kind of stuff that he did with Birdie in his youth, relative youth. Not only is he wanting to do that, because he does have, like, there is like that one thing that he felt was unforgivable that isn't revealed to us until later in the book, but for the most part, he does have that just sense of really he does have that sense of regret. And in addition to that, he has that it kind of falls by the wayside a little bit later in the book, but in the early parts of the book, like his whole reason for bonding with Mr. Bowditch and for working with Mr. Bowditch and doing odd jobs for him and everything is because he views the opportunity to do that as a sign from God or whatever deity there is, because he, like, in his darkest moments when he is very much like angry about his dad, and he wants, like, he prays that his dad gets sober, and he wants, like, he promises, like, God or whoever, he promises, like, I will do anything you want, just please let him get sober and everything, and he does. And so he sees, like, Mr. Bowditch as, like, okay, it's his penance for asking God to help his father, and then that leads to all the stuff in Impus and everything. So I find that to be really interesting, because, like you said, he is also dealing with that regret and that inner turmoil of trying to figure out if he really is a good person, or if he has the capability of having this dark well within him that he can pull from to do things that aren't that good on the surface or anything. So the morality at the center of this book is really fascinating to me, and the way that Charlie kind of takes on these challenges as he goes through is really kind of the best part of the book for me. Even if the book kind of faltered by the end for me, that kind of moral compass of Charlie Reed, free band name, is really is really fascinating to me, and the way that King kind of plays it out is very, very compelling. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And I think he's one word I didn't mention that I think describes him well is also mature.
Yeah.
I think a 17-year-old analyzing themselves so accurately, or so not accurately, but so with such
Yeah.
depth is kind of surprising. Like, most 17-year-olds are horny idiots running around doing dumb shit.
Mhm.
And he's not that. I mean, he actually gives up, he gives up sports, gives up
Mhm.
football and stuff like that to walk down this path. It's kind of amazing.
Mhm.
So yeah, he's also he's surprisingly mature as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that really helps with that self-awareness. It comes across so genuinely. And I think that's definitely a credit to King's writing. He just really has this strength in writing the inner monologues of the character, and really demonstrating the kind of point A to point B of his journey, really. which is really, really impressive because, I mean, Charlie is a young character. He's 17, so it's just interesting because I know that King can kind of struggle with youth in his storytelling a little bit, at least these days. But when he has a very precocious character as a teenager, it comes across incredibly well done and well drawn. So I really liked it. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. What other stuff can we talk about in non-spoilers for this book? Because I feel like that's really, really brief. But what else in non-spoilers? The relationship between him and Radar. You want to talk about that a little bit?
That I feel like it's just really wholesome, like obviously dogs like Radar do exist where they're very intelligent dogs and super loyal, and they are truly characters in someone's story.
Yeah,
those dogs exist for sure. And Radar is one of them. It's so I am a sucker for a dog. I adore dogs. I like if you go to my Instagram or TikTok accounts, like most of the accounts I follow are like dogs and then DIY stuff. Like that's mostly what I follow. I love dogs, and so like I'm a sucker for a great bond between a person and a dog in a story. So like King had me hook, line, and sinker with, the relationship between Radar and Charlie, and also Radar and Mr. Bowditch too. Mr. Bowditch is basically willing to do everything, risk his life for his dog, and that's so wholesome and adorable and great and fun. And I'm so glad to. I feel like King's go-to pet is a cat. Like there's been so many cats throughout his stories. I guess maybe I'm wrong, but I guess I think of Church obviously is the obvious example from Pet Cemetery, but maybe I'm just
there've been quite a few
or
dogs.
Something.
Yeah,
they're having. I mean, hell, Cujo is a whole goddamn story about a dog.
Yeah.
But
also the Tommyknockers. What's her name's dog, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Oi kind of has a canine, role, if you will. So I don't know. It was just I'm a sucker for it, and it totally delivered for me.
Nice. Same here to an extent. So I'll expand more on this in spoilers and everything, but I feel like you, that relationship in the book really got me hook, line, and sinker. I was fully anticipating this story to be all about Charlie and Radar and it being about the power of that bond and everything. But I feel like at a certain point, that becomes... At a certain point, the story of Charlie and Radar reaches its conclusion. Like the story that's set up for those two characters reaches like the final stage of its story, and then their relationship becomes secondary to all the other stuff going on in Empus. And that was where the book kind of lost me a little bit, because I wanted it to be more invested in Charlie and Radar, and I had this idea, and like I felt like I was on the right wavelength through the first third of the book, because these, as it's stated in the synopsis and everything, Charlie's mother died when he was a young age, and then Mr. Bowditch passes away, kind of as the kind of jumpstart of the main plot of the book and everything. And I really thought that was going to be the focal point of the bond between Charlie and Radar. I thought that it was going to be these two souls grieving the loss of people in their lives, and then the bond growing there. And there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that throughout the novel that is satisfying and everything, but I wanted that to be the focal point. And as much as I enjoyed the imagination aspect and the just kind of at times a little grotesque, like stuff in Empis and his adventure in the other world and everything. Like, as much as I enjoyed that, I just felt like at a certain point, the relationship between Charlie and Radar kind of just becomes secondary or tertiary to the story. And that's where like my interest kind of waned a little bit. As much as I was interested in the imagination of the story going forward, it just felt like it just didn't really satisfy that itch anymore after a certain point. Did you feel any of that, or
it did take a back seat for sure. Their journey kind of took a back seat, and it's a little I don't know that it bothered me, but I feel like Charlie goes on this journey for the dog and ends up going a different route, and not going a different route, but taking on this whole other responsibility. And I mean, really, he talks about how his priority is helping and taking care of Radar. That's why he's there. That is the onus of his journey, of their journey. But he takes on all these other responsibilities and kind of promises a lot of stuff to other people. And I don't know that it's hard to buy or tough to swallow, but it's kind of, I think maybe he doesn't specifically say that he sees it as part of his atonement, I guess, or if he's just basically trying to be a good person and help these people. I don't really know if it's ever explicitly laid out why he does that, but I think it's just, in a good versus evil situation, the good guy is going to make the good decisions and do the good things. So I think it was sort of a natural path, I guess. And
I kind of feel like this is probably going to be a little bit reductive of the story and everything. And I don't think it's necessarily as clear as I'm about to say it, but it kind of feels like, to a certain extent, the relationship between Charlie and Radar, the bond that forms, seems to be catering more to developing Charlie as the inherent good guy of the story, to really solidify that he is a good guy and a good person, while also introducing his level of conflict of his morality in his brain, in terms of his regret over the stuff that he's done in the past, and his lack of confidence in whether or not he's an inherently good person. But that, I don't know, maybe it boils down to me just kind of expecting it to be a different story, and wanting it to be a different story instead of being that good versus evil, otherworld kind of conflict. But I don't know. I just kind of wanted more. I always want more of a bond between an animal and a character. So, what we got was satisfying. It was good. It was just unexpectedly taken to it unexpectedly takes a backseat, after a certain point. So that was kind of an adjustment for me. Yeah. We haven't talked really at all about Empis and the other world and everything. So we're going to probably have to save most of that for spoilers. But before we go into spoilers, do you want to kind of give an overview of what you thought about the lore of Empis and the history and like the way that King just develops that before our eyes and ears throughout the story once he gets there? Kind of in non-spoilers, do you want to share how you felt about the world?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty well done for a single book that's presumably not going to have any sequels or anything, or maybe even any prequels or anything. I thought it was pretty well done. Stephen King is a very good world building author. He's not afraid to write a long book. He's not afraid to take a detour in a story in order to develop a character or develop a plot point or develop anything for that matter, including develop his world. And he did a great job with this. I had a ton of empathy for the people who live in Empus. I liked how there was this sort of tone and a like a collective trauma amongst all these people who are, as Charlie is making his way, they're kind to him and they're welcoming to him, but they're also obviously suffering.
Yeah.
And that is an interest that automatically I'm like, okay, what's going on here? This is sad, disturbing, interesting, intriguing. I want to know what's going on here, and it totally pulled me in. So I really liked that. I also maybe this is a more of a choice from Seth Numrich, who narrated the book, but I really liked his Empus accent. It definitely was not like a simple generic British accent. It seemed like more of he was going for like a Northern England, like little more of a like almost Scottish. There's a little bit of Irish in there too, maybe. But just this really, and there's some kind of like in The Dark Tower, there's some unique phrasing and stuff that's unique to this story. That's not just it has its own language at times, and that's really just fun. Not every author thinks to go that deep with it, and I just appreciated that. I think some of the backstory stuff, like with the royal family, was a bit rushed and could have been fleshed out better. Like if there is a prequel or something that comes out of this book, that would be an interesting storyline, I think, to see, what Empus was like before this story, or a young Mr. Bowditch could also be kind of interesting. But yeah, I think Empus was built well. I mean, I really do, especially since a lot of this book, like the first third of it, takes place here in Earth. Like there's so much of the story is committed to Charlie taking over for Mr. Bowditch and becoming his friend and helping him as home and becoming a caretaker for him and for Radar, like before he ever goes to Empus. I mean, it's like a third of the book. I mean, Stephen King kind of hamstrung himself a little bit in that regard. It's like, okay, I have to build this whole world in 2/3 of my novel. Like I don't need like the whole first third of my novel is dedicated to other things, which of course I freaking loved. I mean, when it comes to that part, the setup, he left no stone unturned, and I loved that. It was great. So yeah, sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there.
No, not at all. I agree, and that's where I kind of think that it would have been better served to have an extra like 200 pages in that second or last third of the novel. And interesting,
totally.
Yeah, the rest of the kind of about the book section on Simon and Schuster, I thought this was interesting that it says, early in the pandemic, King asked himself, what could you write that would make you happy? And then he's quoted as saying, as if my imagination had been waiting for the question to be asked, I saw a vast deserted city, deserted but alive. I saw the empty streets, the haunted buildings, a gargoyle head lying overturned in the street. I saw smashed statues of what I didn't know, but I eventually found out. I saw a huge sprawling palace with glass towers so high their tips pierced the clouds. Those images released the story I wanted to tell. So I find that interesting that in a certain respect, this is a response to the pandemic for King. In a certain respect, this is part of, I would say, judging from that, I could extrapolate that to mean that this could be something that was born out of the isolation of the COVID-19 pandemic in a sense. Do you see what I mean there? Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that this story came out of that. You'd think there'd be more, I don't know, more isolation maybe in the story, but there's none. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
not really anyways,
Mm-mm.
and not anything significant. It's all, I mean, if anything, Charlie, he gains so many friends. There's
Yeah.
very little isolation in this story. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting that's where this came from.
Yeah, it's interesting because like you said, it's not a lot of isolation per se, but there's just a lot of I would call it aged despair. Because when he gets to Empus and he learns about the backstory about the Galleons and everything, it just feels like this sense of despair across the land that really, really kind of helps build up the rest of the story. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of beating around the bush. Do you want to go into spoilers?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to go into spoilers for Fairy Tale. So if you haven't read it, go read it or listen to it and come back and listen to the spoiler section. But in order to break us off into spoilers, I'm going to play I'm going to play music to bring us into spoilers. Once again, for those leaving us in this episode, check out patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, and check out that $4 Patreon tier for only Stephen King related stuff, which, by the way, I have a bunch of book reviews of Stephen King stuff, story by story reviews of his short story collections, and several commentary tracks, including The Shining, Dr. Sleep, It Chapter 2, or It Chapter 1. I'm not sure which one, but whichever one is not on the main feed of Tower Junkies, and just a whole bunch of stuff. So check that out, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. And now we're going to go into spoilers for Fairy Tale. Okay, so spoilers on for Fairy Tale. And Tiny, the first thing I want to bring up, since we both listened to the audiobook, there is such a delightful surprise in the audiobook that is kind of given away on the cover of it, because it says it's narrated by Seth Numrich and Stephen King. The part where after Bowditch dies and Charlie finds the tape, I guffawed, and I was just blown away by Stephen King popping up to perform the narration of the audio cassette tape from Mr. Bowditch. How did you feel about that? Did you have any reaction to that?
Yeah, of course I loved it. I mean, How could I not?
Oh, yeah.
Stephen King is, I don't know if we talked about him much on here, but he is a proponent of audiobooks. Like and digital books. Like he's been on board with that since the beginning. And I think, I want to say it's in On Writing, maybe he has anecdotes about having his son basically record books on tape for him.
Yeah, he would have he would have Owen read books and record them so that he could listen back to them. And then another anecdote he has is that he would listen to the audiobooks for The Dark Tower every time he would go back to writing a Dark Tower novel, just to refamiliarize himself with the world and everything. So he is a big proponent of audiobooks, and I love that about him.
Yeah, I love that too. And that, him doing that illustrates his dedication to it. And I love it. And, he's an old son of a bitch now. So him doing a voice for an old man is pretty fitting, unfortunately. Is, but yeah.
Very crotchety performance and very thick. Yeah. Right. He takes down, or I don't know if it's necessarily, thick accent. That's not really his own, but it's a lot of fun. It's a joy.
Yeah.
But the other thing I kind of want to bring up and touch on is a couple of the references, and then we can get into the meat of the story and everything. There are a lot of little references here and there. The ones that I caught were their reference to Childe Roland to The Dark Tower Came. That's kind of early on in the book. And then someone tells Charlie there are other worlds than these. And then something I keyed into and I talked about on my Patreon recordings is that when he's talking about Birdie, I think it's Birdie, in like interacting or being chased by Radar when they were younger, I found this interesting, and I don't know. I'll have to go back and like kind of chart how this goes in King's writing. But he references it like saying like, "Oh, that dog is vicious." He's like, or she's like, that dog Cujo in the movie Cujo. And I found that really interesting because I feel like there is likely a pattern where King will reference the movie if it's not something that is in like a shared universe. So like if he were to set this in like around like Castle Rock or Chamberlain, Maine, or wherever Cujo takes place, and wanted to tie it in with Cujo, he would have said like, oh, like that rabid dog that killed a bunch of people. But instead, it's like, okay, he's not connecting it to that. It has nothing to do with Cujo, so we're going to reference the movie. And I don't know. I'm tickled by that.
Okay, that didn't jump out to me, or I guess I haven't noticed that trend of his. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a hopeful trend. I don't know if there's a pattern, but I feel like there is maybe something there to that. But then the other one that I want to mention is that he at the end of the novel, Charlie. It's when he goes back home and he sees the missing child posters and everything. His full name is on it as Charlie McGee Reed, which is great because it's a Firestarter reference because the little girl in Firestarter is Charlie McGee. So I enjoyed that. So,
okay.
Anyway,
nice.
Yeah. Were there any other references that you caught or?
Nothing that jumps out. Yeah, nothing that jumps to mind. I'm sure there's probably something. But
yeah, there's probably some that I'm forgetting too. But let's talk about it in spoilers. How did you feel about the book in spoilers?
Again, still really enjoyed it. I think I'm trying to decide what my favorite part is, or like what I love so much about it. But I think one of the best parts is the fact that it was told in the first person from Charlie, and it's his perspective in the future. Like he's grown up, he's been through this story already, he's recounting it for us.
Yeah.
I think that was a good choice, and I especially enjoyed that for the kind of denouement, the climax and the denouement where he's sort of explaining, so Radar ended up living another, 11 years or what, I can't even remember what the numbers are, but she died 5 years ago or whatever, and I can't even calculate how long she lived or whatever. And I really love the fact that this story was completely put to bed. Like he literally sealed up the entrance to Empis.
Yeah.
With like bricks and concrete and stuff. So, because as I was reading this story, I was like, we're coming back here. This is going to be, we have to, right? And like, I love the fact that it's self-contained, but I would be so on board to go back to Empis again without question. And I just think it's so interesting how he fully committed to that. Like, no, this is a one-time story. He's not. And also the character of Charlie, he's like, I'm never going back there because, and I think, it's a bit of a cautionary tale because it's never, I don't know that it's overtly mentioned or like brought up how much time Mr. Bowditch spent there, but we know it was a lot, like, because he was so detached from real life and was so behind on technology and news and the goings on of the real world, quote unquote, that he had spent probably decades in Empis. And I think
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, I realize I'm wrong as I'm about to say, but like long enough to where he came back as his own son, right? But I guess that's true because I mean, in terms of being on the sundial. But it's enough time had passed in our world that he could come back as his own son. I don't know. And Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's that plays to the point that I think Charlie chose like, hey, he chose if I go back here, I'm not going to want to leave. I'm going
Yeah.
to fall in love with the princess, and she's
Mhm.
going to fall in love with me. And he's like, I'm going to. I think he sort of thinks, if I stay here, I'm going to leave my own fingerprints all over this,
Oh,
and
that's
sort
interesting.
of, he's like, I'm going to, in a way, maybe kind of corrupt this
Mhm.
world. Not that he's a bad guy or that it would necessarily be for the worse. It's just that he would inevitably bring his world into
Mhm.
Empus and maybe cheapen it or change it a little bit and take away some of its charm and wonder. I think, and that's all
Yeah.
interpreted by me.
Mhm.
That's not overtly explained or anything, but I feel like maybe that's what was at play when he decided to
Mhm.
do that. Because I mean, if this was me, if I was in his shoes, I would totally go back there
Oh,
and
yeah.
visit it often,
Mhm.
because it's such an incredible, magical place.
Yeah.
I just thought that was such a cool choice that he decided to contain this to one book, seals it
Mhm.
off, done. I thought that was really interesting.
Me too. And with Charlie, his choice there, it does seem like it's the opposite of what Mr. Bowditch did. Mr. Bowditch invested so much of his time in Empus, and there's that common or that repeated refrain throughout it where he says that Mr. Bowditch says that presents are for are people who give presents are cowards or something like that. Um, and that's something that I feel like is like you're right on the money with that if Charlie returned and brought stuff like not even like physical objects from our world into Empus, but just bringing that influence and that life into Empus, it could maybe not fully corrupt it, but it would change it into where it would lessen the magic of Empus, I guess. And that also is what kind of it comes down to at the end, where he kind of professes his love to Leah and says that like he tells her that he could see himself creating a life there and everything with her, and she just flat out says like, you don't belong here, like this is not your world. And that's kind of the impetus for him to go back and return, which is great because he needs to go back, obviously. But the other side of that is, I kind of wonder. Like one of the things that I was fascinated about was, I loved what we got of the lore and the mythology of Empus and the Galleons and their downfall and the curse that was afflicted among the remaining Galleons. Leah's mouth being sewn shut, and it makes me cringe and just grosses me out that there's like a scar that she has to open up to take sustenance. It just that really makes me uncomfortable. And then at the end when she like forces her mouth open to scream at her brother, at Flight Killer, Eldon. That was powerful. But anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But that's what I was going to say. Actually, do you have anything to say about that? Because I have another topic I'm going to bring up. But I don't want to overload the conversation.
I appreciated the creative choice where
Mhm.
the members of the royal family all have these different like sensory afflictions. That was
Yeah.
I agree. It was also like you said, it was kind of cringy. That mixed with the gray
Mhm.
was again just a lot of this sensory descriptions that were kind of potent and really
Yeah.
I feel like I could visualize them all really well, and they felt very genuine and effective. Yeah, I just that's all I really have to say about that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The emphasis on the sensories and everything was really good. But the next part I was going to bring up was the idea of Charlie being conflicted about his morality and everything, but also the fact that he is fulfilling a role in the fairy tale of Empus, in that I really like the idea, like this kind of spiritual level of the book, in that in his time in the first like third of the book, when he's like in his normal life, he's talking about how, you know, the world, the universe, God, Ka, whatever you want to call it, has placed Mr. Bowditch in his like world so that he can help him, and then by extension help Empus. And then when he gets to Empus, he is like, as he's meeting people and he's learning about everything, like he's immediately referred to as definitely not being the prince that was promised. Like, he's not blonde. He looks nothing like what was prophesized. But as he's going through the story, as he's going through this adventure and getting deeper into the world, like the world Empus changes him into, like it fits him into the prince that was promised. And that's what leads to him being able to facilitate the coming of the queen and the downfall of Flight Killer and all of that. I just love this idea that he wasn't born as the prince. Like, he wasn't destined to be that. It felt like Empus and the magic of Empus just saw the opportunity to create in him, and saw the level to which he could become the savior of Empus to an extent, and just basically thrust it on him. I think that that's a really interesting storytelling arc by King. It's like the reluctant hero and everything. It's really good stuff. So I don't know. How did you feel about his embracing of the prophecy?
Yeah, again, I think it sort of clashed with, you brought it up earlier, I think it kind of clashed with his journey to help Radar.
Yeah.
It's interesting that he decided to take all that on, you know, because he suffers deeply for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I relate to it, because I don't think I'd be able to, if I were there, I don't think I'd be able to look at all these people with these afflictions and not help them.
Yeah.
You know, so I respect it, and I found it really interesting, and I liked it. And I think it was, I like your analysis that I think the role was kind of, it wasn't destiny. It was just kind of an opportunity that the magic of Empus chose him and was like, hey, you're going to do this. And he was almost reluctantly took it on, or it was reluctantly thrust upon him, I guess. That is also kind of fascinating, because I feel like, you know, he's a character who's been embracing doing things and taking things on and trying to be a better person, but he didn't really have a choice in this, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like this is going to be a novel that when I return to it and listen to it again or read it again, my affection for it might grow, because I keep getting the sticking point for me is the way that the book feels. I mean, it's basically in three parts. It's basically his time with Mr. Bowditch and his time in Empus getting Radar to the sundial, and then his time being held captive and then saving the world. Like it takes that kind of structure, and that's good. That's all well and good. That's well drawn. That's well drawn plotting and everything. But I really felt like it was supposed to, or it was going to be all about his journey and his bond with Radar. And once he gets Radar on the sundial, I'm like, oh, okay. Now she's going to be like in a position to protect him. And like, I was very much thinking like, oh my God, this is going to go into a terrible route. She's going to die protecting him or something. Fortunately, that doesn't happen. But what does happen is he gets captured, and then there's a run of like maybe 200 pages where he's not, like, Radar's not in the picture anywhere, like at all. And like the stuff in the prison in Deep Marine and everything is really, really good and intriguing. And especially with the Fair One stuff and him having to, being forced to basically kill, the guy, Claw. That's really good for his character arc and stuff. But throughout that whole section, I'm like, all right, get back to radar. Like, let's get the dog back.
Right.
So yeah. Any thoughts on that or any other?
Yeah, I thought the whole, we haven't really talked about the whole Deep Maline part where he's imprisoned. I thought that was really effective, and I was really into that whole part because I just thought it was incredibly bleak. I mean, there was a lot of bleakness in Empus because of the Gray and the royal family being afflicted the way they are, but I feel like there was a certain degree of hope amongst all that. But once he gets imprisoned and is in a dungeon and is being trained to fight to the death, it's all very, very bleak, and it's hard to see any hope. And it was just effective. And him sort of becoming the chosen one, if you will, and him starting to understand that that's the way this is heading for him, that magic starting to take effect, if you will, was all really compelling. I was so compelled by it, and that was some of the most interesting parts of the book for me.
Nice.
It was just compelling, and I thought it was a great direction to take it in, even though it did, like you're saying, it did clash with the whole storyline of Radar. And that was the worst part. I was like, he doesn't even have his dog. Like,
yeah,
sweet little puppy.
Yeah, she's a good girl.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then my kind of final, like, I guess criticism, not even criticism of it, is that I feel like once the escape happens, and once they get out of the dungeons and the prison and everything, it seems like it is just a very rushed climax to like, while I enjoyed the journey through like the palace and learning about how the Galleons ruled and everything, all of that stuff is really good, like storytelling and everything. But once we get to the point where, okay, they need to go to the deep well, they need to go take down Flight Killer, but first they have to save Percy, and then they also have to take down Red Molly, and they have to take down Hannah. And like those sections, like Red Molly, Hannah, and even Flight Killer, those like are like kind of big bad moments, like big bad like boss battles.
Boss fights, yeah.
Yeah, and like I felt really kind of just a little bit disappointed by them, because they're very brief, they're very quick, there's not a lot of there's not a lot of substance to them, really, because they're both like, I mean, Molly just like swallows her teeth and dies, and then Hannah's just shot, basically, I think.
Right.
And that's it. And I'm like, I'm thinking like, okay, Hannah's supposed to be like he sets up this whole thing where she's grieving Red Molly and everything, and I'm thinking like, okay, this is going to be a big event, like him having to fight and having to kill Hannah to get to the deep well and all, or whatever. I'm just like, oh, okay, and then it's just like kind of just like it comes and goes, and I'm like, okay, fine, that's a little disappointing. So that's where I kind of got a little bit of disappointment. Yeah, and then yeah, and I wish that there was a little bit more time spent in the deep well with the reveal of it being like a completely different world. Yeah, I thought that would have been a little bit better, but what we got was satisfying enough. I just kind of wanted more.
Yeah, that I agree. Some of those kind of boss fight type things, like you were saying, were a little anticlimactic and a little rushed as well. I totally agree with that, especially because a lot of them had build up too. Like, there was a lot of time dedicated to how menacing these characters were, and then he kind of defeats them sort of easily almost.
Yeah.
So I fully agree with that. And I also agree with the kind of the deep well thing, although I think that was pretty effective in my book. I did like that part. It made me think of kind of gave me sort of hints of Revival a little bit with the climax of Revival.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of made me think of that a little bit. So, and just again, you know, the whole, it's totally the conclusion of that where he sort of puts a cap, if you will, kind of seems like totally set up for a sequel. Like, like it seems like just a very temporary thing. Like the flight killer is going to come back, or like this evil that he is essentially that he is sort of seemingly quelled is going to come back. Like it's just he closed the door is what he did, and like someone's going to open that door again, you know. And it feels like there's such a sequel. It's such a setup for a sequel, but apparently not.
Yeah, absolutely. And like even then, like it's not even Flight Killer. It's the God, what was it called? The Gog-Magog. And like that was really cool. That was a good payoff and everything. But yeah, it does feel like, okay, it's not, like you said, it just puts a lid on the problem. Like it just feels like a little bit. I don't know. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Before I forget, Lillimar is the city that they're in. Did Lillimar give you was it serving you Lud vibes from the Dark Tower?
It was giving Lud vibes. It was giving Lud. But to put in the parlance of TikTok, but or whatever. But yeah, in a little, just a tiny bit. I didn't really hone in on the Lud connections or anything. What I was kind of focused on in the early parts of the book, when he first goes to Empus, I kind of had this like. I had this moment where I was like, am I going to be just as clever as Stephen King, and am I going to know what he's going to do? Because I thought like it would have been really interesting, or I thought there was potential that it could have been revealed that this was Garland, the like fantasy realm of Eyes of the Dragon. And I thought that maybe that would like dovetail into this story. But ultimately, I'm happy that it is a self-contained story that's not connected to that. But I didn't make too much of a connection to Lud. But yeah, I can definitely see that. It did remind me a little bit of that. Especially that's what it reminded me of. It reminded me, like the idea of the gray reminded me a lot of the grays and pubes in the Wastelands.
Yeah. Right.
And kind of that kind of radioactive sort of world. I don't know. Just an abandoned a major city that's been like mostly abandoned, but you know there's things going on behind closed doors. Like you're being watched as you're making your way through a city that's basically abandoned, but it's really not, kind of thing. That's just kind of a creepy vibe. I kind of appreciated that. Totally. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Fairy Tale? Anything else we want to talk about?
I think we covered it pretty good. I touched on it earlier, but I adored, maybe this is a little, I don't know if it's a little insensitive, but I adored, Seth Numrich's, performance of the, gosh, I can't even remember her name.
Is it Claudia?
The deaf character. Just his delivery of that voice was so entertaining.
It really was.
And she was clunky, and she was just like, she like cursed and stuff like that, and she just, like for probably weeks after, I would find myself saying like, no. That was so funny. Like when I would be like when Gizmo would be running off, I'd be like, no, Gizzy.
I love it so much. Like, that's awesome.
I just latched onto that, and just of course the Charlie.
Charlie.
I found that so entertaining.
It was. And Seth Numrich's performance is incredible throughout across the board.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
great.
Oh yeah. Nice. Should we kind of wind down and kind of give overall thoughts on Fairy Tale and if it'll make our top 19s or anything, or is there anything else we want to talk about before we kind of wind things down a little bit?
I think I'm good. I think I'm ready to button it up.
Nice. All right. Well, overall, I enjoyed Fairy Tale. Like I said, that last like third of the book just kind of didn't connect with me as strongly as the first 2/3. I feel like upon revisiting this book, I think I'll get a lot of I'll get more enjoyment out of it, or maybe it'll convalesce a lot better, or convalesce. I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah, sure. It'll come together real good. But with that, it's not going to make my top 19 now, but it is a very good imaginative story with a very, very compelling and good character at its center. So I can't fault it too hard for my expectations for the narrative versus what I got. But the biggest criticism I can give it is that I wanted more, which I think speaks to the quality of the story itself and more into my selfishness as a reader, I guess. So yeah, I enjoyed it. How about you? Kind of final thoughts on Fairy Tale, Tiny?
I really enjoyed it myself. I think it might possibly make my top 19. I'm going to have to examine that, which is something I say a lot. But yeah, I think there's a very good shot that it would make my top 19. I loved the world building. I really loved the characters. There's really sweet and touching boy and his dog storylines going on. There's a huge passage of time. There's a lot of great character linking and interaction that I thought was just really touching and satisfying. I do agree with you though that I don't think he stuck the landing. I think he could have done better in the final third, the climax and the denouement. But overall, I just thought it was such a fun story, just such a good story that I was just really into and did not want to. I wanted to listen to it and I wanted to come back to it and finish it because I was really on board. And I keep mentioning the whole, I feel like this is ripe for a sequel or a prequel, or he did such a good job building this world. I want to go back to it. I want to see Empus again. But I also just really respect the fact that I don't think he's going to, and I think he almost explicitly laid it out in the storytelling of this book that we're never coming back here. And maybe that's good, leave him wanting more. Maybe that's a good choice. Again, I respect the hell out of it. I think it's really fascinating. And, if I had written this, I would have probably left the door open for, to come back here. But I feel like he really closed that door, and I respect the decision. But I'd love to come back to Empus. I'd love to see it again.
Oh yeah. Same here.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is our review of Fairy Tale by Stephen King. And so we're going to kind of wind down the episode. Tiny, I'm like nervous to say this because it's a big thing for the podcast, but Tiny, what are you, by the way, I didn't ask this before when we were talking privately, but what are you currently reading? Because you said that you're finishing up something.
Yes, I'm reading a book. It was recommended to me by friend of the show, Matt Andreyko.
Oh, nice.
It's his favorite book. It's called Demon. It's spelled Daemon. It's written by Daniel Suarez.
Okay.
It's he works. Our friend Matt. He works in IT security, and this book is about like this guy who creates a almost like an AI that like takes over after he dies, and it like like kind of tries to take over the world through the internet, and like,
Oh, nice.
it's a really cool book, and I had read it several years ago when Matt recommended it, but something caused it to kind of jog in my memory, and I wanted to read it again. It's not super long. It's like, I think it's like 15 hours. The audiobook is. So
Sweet.
I just kind of randomly threw it on a couple weeks ago, and wanted to finish it up. And there's also a sequel to it that I have not read.
Okay.
That I kind of wanted to get to as well. So that's why it's just, I kind of randomly threw that on, but it's a good book. It's pretty interesting.
Sweet. I might have to check it out. But Tiny, like I'm giggling about this. Tiny, what? So after you finish that, what are you gonna read next?
I'm gonna be reading this little book called The Gunslinger.
Yes, that's so interesting because I am reading The Gunslinger as well. Huh. Interesting.
How'd that happen?
Yeah. How'd that happen? Like 5-6 years after we started the Dark Tower podcast. No, yeah. So I guess we can announce it. Next time on the podcast, next time thereabouts, we are going to begin our journey covering the Dark Tower series. So a few things you guys should know up front. This is a promise that we made at the beginning of this podcast, at the beginning of the podcast world of Tower Junkies, and we're finally gonna start paying on that promise. But one of the things I want to do is I want to make sure that we do it right. And so what we're doing is we are going piece by piece through the Dark Tower series. So the next episode is going to be a dive into the Gunslinger, part 1, chapter 1, The Gunslinger. That's all we're going to cover in that episode. And then from there, we're going to go chapter by chapter. So the Gunslinger is going to comprise of 5 episodes of the podcast plus a wrap-up episode kind of talking about the book overall. Here's the thing that we're going to do, though, is that when we're going through the Gunslinger, this is going to be my 4th time through the Dark Tower series. Tiny, how many times have you read the Dark Tower?
This will be my first time with audiobooks.
Right. But what we're going to do on the podcast is we're not going to spoil the series. We want this to be a journey for everyone listening. If they want to read along with us, you can. So you can read along with us and listen to the reviews without being, and the discussions and everything without being worried about spoilers. However, if you have read through the Dark Tower series, what we are planning on doing is with each episode that we cover the Dark Tower series in, we're going to record a Patreon exclusive recording that is going to be about the spoilers of the entire series and our thoughts on the episodes that we're covering or the sections that we're covering in the grand scheme of things. So that's partially why I made a separate or a curated Patreon tier for people that want to just get the Stephen King content, because if all goes as planned, we're going to have a ton of Dark Tower stuff as well as other Stephen King stuff there. And in addition to that, I'm planning on also working through and kind of sharing my thoughts on the comic book series as well on Patreon. And then eventually that'll filter out into the main feed proper. But we're going to start covering the Gunslinger next time on the podcast, which hopefully will be very soon, sooner rather than later. But that is going to be the next episode, is going to be episode 85 of Tower Junkies. We're going to cover the Gunslinger, chapter 1, the Gunslinger. So now it's out there. Now they know. Now we're going to do it. I'm so excited. Like,
we're committed.
Yes. I've isolated each section for audiobook purposes so that I can listen to each section over and over again. And I took out my paperbacks and I've put little flags for each section in it. And I'm very excited about this. So I don't know if we'll be able to get it next week, but I'm going to commit us to before the end of the month, we'll have our first Gunslinger episode. Is that okay with you, Tiny, to put that on the spot?
Yeah, I think that's doable. It's
Okay,
funny we haven't
perfect.
even recorded the episode yet, and you've already done so much work for it.
I know. Well, I put flags in a paperback, and I cut together some audiobook stuff. But yeah, I've already listened to the first chapter 3 times now, and I'm planning on doing that for on my way to work tomorrow. And just it's gonna be a very immersive deep dive into the Dark Tower series. So.
Wow.
Yeah. So looking forward to that. Tiny, any parting thoughts for the podcast before we wrap up for the evening so that we can go to bed and get ready for work tomorrow?
Other than no, glad to be kicking off another year, year with Stephen King and another year doing the podcast, and going to be a big one, I think, based on what we just announced. Yeah,
I think so as well. It's going to be quite a journey. Can't wait to go on this journey with everyone and with you, Tiny. Yeah, because we read the Dark Tower series pretty much at the same pace the first time we read it, and it'll be fun to just be able to just geek out with you all over this. Yeah, and I think what I want to do is do an initial Patreon exclusive recording where we just we geek out about our history with the Dark Tower series and everything, and then we'll release the first episode and everything. So anyway, all that's to be found on patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can find a Stephen King exclusive, Stephen King only content on the $4 level. Or if you want to support us at $5 or $10, you get all of that plus a ton more. So anyway, check that out, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Tiny, anything else?
Nope. Looking forward to the next one.
All right, me too. I'm going to start playing us out. Yeah, also, forgot to mention, thank you for listening, and also let us know what you thought about Fairy Tale. We'll be back soon with our coverage on The Gunslinger. And yeah, so having said all that, long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.
And now, enjoy this short clip from our Patreon exclusive RSS feed. For the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, such as early access to episodes, TV, book, and movie reviews and reaction recordings, commentary tracks, and Patreon potpourri episodes, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy. Because of that, I loved the interaction that he had with Charlie. I love that conflict, that drama, that tension and everything. But I would be fine if Christopher Pauly never comes back to the story, because that section, that encounter that Charlie had with him, where Charlie is actually contemplating just murdering Pauly in cold blood, I think that is a brilliant way to really bring in the darkness of Charlie Reed. And I think that you really need that, because Charlie is going into this world where there's clearly like good and evil at play. It is playing with those like big, wide storytelling structures and everything. And
this podcast was edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find links to all of our shows at ObsessiveViewer.com/podcasts. For exclusive bonus content, including reviews, commentaries, and B-roll episodes, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.